Okay, now let's go to where I left off last time. Now, making on the point of when you first become a Christian, uh, I want to go on to another point. When you decide to become a Christian and you go through the steps to become one, uh, what happens next? What needs to happen next? The thing to realize that you're now a new creature in Christ, and that the old you has died. It is no longer you're no longer the old you is no longer around. You have been reborn, supposedly. So if you go through baptism and you come out wanting sex, alcohol, drugs, the things that detract from you, all the things that you used to do before you supposedly became a Christian, um, you're still desiring all the old sins. That was the old you. You haven't been reborn yet, and ministers try to convince you that being reborn is such an easy thing. You just say this magical poem, magical prayer, call it what you want, and invite Jesus into your heart, take a 5-minute bath, and all of a sudden you're just reborn. All the old habits, all the old wants, all the old desires, they're just poof, gone. There's nothing further from the truth. Um, it is a work. It is work. And, like faith without works is useless. You are a work to become the new creature. All that doesn't magically absolve you of everything, doesn't all of a sudden takes away all your desires. It doesn't work that way. If you ever read so many news, all these things that good Christians, all the criminal things, the lascivious things they're doing, uh, when they come up in the news and you say, how could they? They're good Christians. Uh, Being a good Christian doesn't matter. We are all prone to sin. The only difference is which sins we will ascribe to, which sins we will allow ourselves to perform. Because you can make it to where you, even though you desire the sins, you will still defer gratifying yourself through those sins. You can be strong and not do the sins. And that's not to say that you won't have the desire to do the sins. And at one point, maybe I'll also mention that having a desire is also not a good thing. But I'll leave that for later. Um, so when you come out of it and you're still having the old habits, the old things you used to do, nothing's changed yet, you haven't been reborn. Okay? So if you're reborn, the first thing that you do is start judging others, as most ministers and religious leaders, the first thing they do is to make you feel like you're superior, you're better than others, and to judge others and condemn others because they're not as good as you. That's a manipulation ploy. They're manipulating you. Um, and and this isn't great error. This is not something you should do. And if you listen to Jesus, read the Bible, one of the big things that everybody tells you, do not judge others, you will be judged. Judge not, or you shall be judged. They use variations of how they want to say, but basically, don't judge others. And still, even your ministers will teach you to judge others. And how you're so much better than those other sinners. And even in Jesus' story, when he talks about the Pharisee praying, saying, oh God, thank God that I'm not like that sinner over there. It's the same concept. So if you're doing all this and you're supposedly a new creature born from Christ, and you're doing all this stuff, you haven't changed. Um, you know, uh, like if you claim to be following Jesus, um, you have to realize he never showed any of those traits. Um, and like I said, a lot of people prefer to be followers. And I've heard a little thing where a parishioner is being asked, now Jesus didn't teach about hating gays, about hating foreigners, people coming across the border. He didn't believe in that. He was more liberal. And he said, well, it's about time for me to find another church if this one's going to teach that. So when you go into a church to hear what you want, you're not following the religion you're going into. What you're trying to find is somebody to validate what you want to believe. So that basically makes it moot, to where you go into a Christian church and hear the things that you want to hear, unless you're one of the best saints that I've ever heard of. You're changing the religion. The religion's not changing you. You're not being a servant of God, and you're following God only until he displeases you. Then you'll stop. So, but that's, it's not entirely your fault, because you're being taught this. Your religious leaders, they push this, and the reason for that is manipulation and making more money for themselves. They're getting rich through manipulating you, and plus now they're using you as a voting block, so they're getting power and money, because they can pressure religious, or they can pressure political people into doing what they want, whether it's something to do with the church or not. It's not always clear and dry that they want specific things passed because of the church. A lot of the things that they make very vocal about passing is because they want to control people. They want to manipulate. They want to teach them false doctrines so that they fall in line and pressure their political leaders. Oh, you better abolish abortion. It's killing lives. We're pro-life. And then turn around and say, but we don't want welfare for anyone, because lazy people don't need to eat. They don't need to be helped. We don't want food stamps. We don't want free lunches for children, because their parents need to get out and do 3 or 4 jobs that are underpaid to give them that. Of course, they don't ask that part. They just say, oh, lazy people, that they're mooching off of us to pay for their kids' lunches, to pay for their welfare, to pay for their insurance, the Medicaid. And so they misrepresent a lot of things to manipulate you into being angry at something that really doesn't exist. So you're all pro-life for a pregnant woman to be forced to have a baby, but you're not pro-life in taking care of the children that are starving, that are really suffering. The children inside the womb, the potential children inside the womb, are not suffering, unless there's something medically wrong with them, physically wrong. They're not suffering, or unless the mother's starving, which could possibly happen when under today's environment. The mortality rate for pregnant women in the United States is deplorable. So this is just tactics they use to manipulate, to get you to focus on something other than what they're actually doing. They want you to focus everything into what they're telling you and ignore all the stuff they're doing, all the other stuff they're doing. So, that's why religious people are a single, they're a single option voters. They pick one thing that they like about the party and vote for their party because they promise they're going to do that. And they don't care about any of the other ramifications that happen, because what else they're going to do. So be careful with that. Religion should not be politicized, and your minister should not be more powerful than your congressman. They should be humble. Okay. Okay. So, and like I was saying, all evil leaders in the past, not only spiritual leaders, but other leaders, they know that to make a people or congregation to stick together, they have to show them someone to hate or to judge, like Hitler did with the Jews. And other leaders that have done that have given this someone to hate, some of them to focus their energy on, so they ignore what they're doing, on how they're taking over and how they're taking away all their rights, taking away all their freedoms. Um, they paint these persons as monsters and horrible things that God detests, God hates. They're not like you as a good Christian. Um, and when they quote the things of the law and the Leviticus and all that, and said these are detestable to God, and detestable is a kind of iffy word. That was chosen more in the terms of convenience than actual meeting the actual criteria that God's saying. Um, and once they unite these people, and then they start taking control of them, and after a while, and I want to tell you, the best weapon that Satan uses against people is guilt and shame. So once you go overboard and start doing all these things, then God uh, pushes on your brain, and God kind of shows you enlightenments. He kind of gives you little pricks and saying, that is not moral. What you're doing is not good. What people will do when they start getting these pangs of conscience, uh, they'll start burying it, avoiding it, or just double down on what they're doing. They won't listen. They'll stop listening to God and just start listening completely to the minister or the religious leader. They'll just start ignoring those pains of guilt and shame, and that's what Satan uses a lot, is guilt and shame to manipulate people into doing what he wants, to convince you to do something other than you would otherwise. Um, and what I would like to point out, I've seen a lot of memes, posts on YouTube and sites. I haven't seen them lately though. They say, I support Jesus. Well, more or less, I'm just coming up with something. I support Jesus and Jesus this and that. And if you don't share this post, remember Jesus said, "If you deny me before man, I will deny you before the Father." That's using guilt. That's using guilt to make people pass on that post, that link, and people benefit from pushing those links. Somebody's benefiting somewhere. Um, so, and even if they weren't, there's nobody benefiting from them. Satan's benefiting because he's causing a lot of guilt and shame for people to say, I don't really want to pass it on, but if I don't, uh, Jesus is going to deny me in the end of times. And one little post is not going to get you denied. If that one little post gets you denied, you were already denied before you even read the post. Um, but that's the tactics, guilt and shame. That's the biggest weapon in the arsenal of Satan and his cohorts, his group of demons and evil spirits and everybody else that he controls. So be aware of that when you're spreading those things, when you're doing something to make people feel shame or guilt that they don't do it. You're falling into the employment of Satan. Satan's using you for his purposes. So try to avoid that. So just remember that when you're judging people, you're judging people on a assumption of what you think you know. You don't know. You do not know the complete complexity of a person. All you know is what you think you see. So when you're judging someone, you don't have all the facts. You don't have enough of anything to make a judgment. All you can do is react to what you see and decide if it's good or bad for you. And then you either engage with the person or stay away from the person. that is what you would do. That is without judging him. Judge the action, judge what he's done, judge what he's saying. Do not judge the person. That is not in your preview. That's not something you're allowed to do. That judgment belongs to God and only God. So when you're trying to usurp God's position, that is exactly what Satan wants from you, to start acting as a God, that you have the powers and the same everything as God has. So when you start taking on the role of God, you're fulfilling what Satan wants you to do, usurp God, to where you think you are a God or godlike, which when it comes to the point where you have to give God his authority over you, you're not going to do it because you already think you have all this authority. You're not going to. One king will not subject himself to another king unless he's forced. He will consider himself an equal. He said, "We're equals unless you beat me in battle." Of course, God could do that easily, but that's not how he likes to work things. So, so just know that when your leader's teaching you to hate persons, persons about getting abortions, people performing abortions, you are in error. You're the one in error, not them. Now, like I said, we all sin. We all do sins that, who's the one that decided the value of sins? Who's the one that assigned value to sins? Who's the one that decided that this sin is more or worse than that sin? Who's the one that decided that, well, this sin will cost me 15 cents, but that sin over there is $50? I don't know who the politician was that assigned all these values to sin, because they're not really elaborated in the Bible. And I know you'll come back to the ones in the law a little bit, where it says that if you commit adultery, that's the blood is on your head and all that, and so that makes it obviously worse than the other ones. And about homosexuality, which the text on that is really not saying anything about homosexuality, not in the text that you're ascribing to it. And I will teach on that later. Okay. Now, again, like when they're teaching you to hate homosexuals, and they use the Bible. They use the Bible as a pretext. Now, what they are doing is in error. What they're teaching you to do is in error. Because when they hate you, they teach you to hate. Is something that Jesus didn't teach. They teach you how to hate other religions because they are not based on God, the God of Israel or Jesus. And then again, you are again in error. Any religion, no matter who they call a God, don't call a God, have multiple gods, if they teach people to be moral, to be upright, to be kind, to care about others, to help others, that is basically working in the concept of God. It is still God under another version, another name. So you can't condemn them. You can't judge them. You can't, because they're learning all the things that you're supposed to be learning, but they're doing it under a different name of the God or the deity that they choose to worship. So anyone that's being taught the right way to life, you should not have an issue with it. And even someone that denies God, that there is God, somebody that says there is no God, an atheist. If that atheist is moral, ethical, kind, supports people, does things out of the goodness of his heart, does all these things, how is he evil? There's a lot of people that claim to be Christians, they love God, and go to church and stuff, then do some of the most god-awful things. So you tell me who's moral, who's not, who's right, who's wrong. Okay? Now, Jesus did say the greatest commandment of all was love So how are you glorifying God by teaching and following hate? Okay, well that's all for today, and I'll see y'all next time. Okay, bye.